Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, has it started?
Yeah. Hello. Start the ceremony. Hi. Dong. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I believe we should be live streaming now on YouTube and Facebook. But yeah, thanks for joining us for World Environment Day. So I'm joined here today with Ian Shimizu.
Hi.
And my name is
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And my name's Chris Krause. I'm working for Future Food Institute. And so we reached out to Ian and kind of had a few little quick discussions beforehand. Ian's the founder of WeMori, which is an organization and platform leading the regenerative movement through the protection and restoration of forests. So today we'll be taking a little deeper look into WeMori and discussing how Ian got into this and other environmental causes. So Ian, if you don't mind giving us a little background.
Of course. Pleasure to be here again. Thank you. It's really weird doing this live thing because we can't see you, but you can see us.
Yeah.
But I hope there's a lot of people out there here who are here today celebrating World Environment Day. Happy World Environment Day. So my name is Ian. I was born in Tokyo. Actually, I was born in Osaka, raised in Tokyo. I'm 28 years old now. And for almost the last decade, I've been committed to environmental causes, particularly climate change. And when I was in university, well, it's always a really hard story to tell because people ask you, where did it begin? And I mean, I can start very, very young, or I could start more recent. But the pivotal days started when I was much younger, when I was a high school student, and I worked at a diving shop. And I really grew a deep love for the environment, and that's still which is with me very much close to my heart today. And that's kind of the origin of why I started environmental activism. There was a very clear landscape that I wanted to protect. And when I was in university, I learned that all over the world, these landscapes were being broken down for economic or social for prosperity. Or another way to phrase it would be that one of the byproducts of our system by design is environmental degeneration. And this reality, when I was confronted by it, inspired fear, inspired surprise, inspired shock within me, which then led to my environmental activism. So when I was in university was when I really started to take action. And in the, since the 7-8 years from that time that I committed to engage in environmental activism, I've worked for an organization called 350. I've done a lot of awareness raising across Japan. I've spoken on radio. I've spoken in front of audiences. And my most recent journey is what I'm working on right now, WeMori, which is focusing on forests. So that's kind of like the in a nutshell version, and like every slice of that story, I can go on forever, but I don't want to, so I'm going to stop there for now.
Cool, thank you. No, that provides a good foundation, I think, for kind of some of what we'll get into. So for those that aren't familiar with 350, I know that's like one of the prominent environmental organizations, actually. So can you talk a little bit more about what 350 does and some of what you were focusing on?
For sure. My journey in 350 started in 2015, and I was still a university student. And 350 at that time was an organization that was set to be the most rapidly growing environmental nonprofit. And the fresh thing about 350 was that it had taken a new approach on climate change. Until then, nonprofits that existed before 350 were doing great things, but they were approaching it from research, awareness raising, and lobbying, and those kinds of activities. And 350 really kind of created this paradigm shift because its focus was movements. It was focusing on community organizing and mobilizing people to take to the streets to rally for political change to tackle climate change. And this was a completely different way of tackling this issue, which till then had not really been mainstream. So 350 were like the new kids on the block at the time. They were actually founded, their first activities date back to 2009, and then they became a kind of an organization around 2012. And 3 years later, they wanted to open an office in Tokyo for 350 Japan. And at that time, I was a university student, very radical university student. I had been studying sociology, and I had read this book, which is probably somewhere in this bookshelf over here. But it's called, and by the way, we're at my house in Tokyo. Anyway, I read a book called A New Green History of the World. I just read the title over there. But it's a book that I've read over and over again, which really shifted the way that I think about this world. It opened me to the realities of the way we have created the society which we have today, and the many basically the degenerative aspects of our society was what I learned from this book. But going back to 350, so I was a radical university student who had just read this book, and I was thinking, okay, like something needs to change. Nobody around me is talking about it. That's terrifying. What can I do? So I started I started meeting people, as many people as I could, in the Japanese environmental scene. So people who worked at nonprofits, asking them about what they do, what I could do. And I met Shin, who was just starting the 350 chapter in Japan, and I was the first intern, still student, and then the second employee of 350 Japan. And my goal was to start the divestment movement in Japan. And the divestment movement was really kind of the engine that was propelling 350's growth, global growth. And what it was, what divestment is the act of pulling money out. That's the definition of divestment. It's just simply putting your money out. Investment is the opposite of it. Investment is putting money in. Divestment is putting money out. And specifically, the divestment movement that 350 had spearheaded was against the fossil fuel industry. So the movement was, at that time, rapidly spreading across universities in the world. And what 350 was doing with these university students was they were creating small groups within universities, which were each rallying their university to divest funds from fossil fuel companies. And so my job was to spread that into Japan in whatever form was possible. And yeah, I did that for about 3 years.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And then Bill McKibben is one of the founders of
Yes.
350, right?
Yeah, one of the unique things about 350 also is that it was started by university students. And Bill was the teacher of a lot of those students at his university. And so yeah, that's how it started. So Bill McKibben, who, for those of you who don't know, is a prominent, very well known, and still super active. He's my sensei. Environmental activist and journalist based in the US. We're still frequently in touch, and he inspires me still to this day. But yes, he's involved.
And this is a little off script, but having watched the recent film, I'm gonna go the opposite way that the film went, and if you kind of the Michael Moore film, which raised some issues, but has many outdated figures and paints him in a pretty poor and inaccurate light, I would say.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just wanted to mention that, like to encourage people who've watched that film to dig a little deeper into the story and into the facts and into the progression that renewables have actually made in the past 5, 10, 15 years. So
definitely. I see that film making its round. I forget the title. You could definitely find
Planet of the Humans.
That one.
Yeah.
And I actually watched it as well.
Yeah.
I would only recommend that you watch it if you're willing to watch it as a piece of comedy, is what I would say, because it's full of lies. It's full of outdated data, as Chris just said. And it takes a very, it attacks a lot of the environmental figures who have really been pulling the narrative forward in the US, namely Bill. And I think it was terribly done. I think it was very vicious. As Bill said, I think is very dishonest. But you can just simply search on the internet for any rebuttal of the facts in the movies, and you'll find it very easily. So just don't let it, don't let it tilt you to the other side. Is what I would say.
Cool. Yeah, like I said, I didn't plan on bringing it up, but I think it's important to actually talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Okay, so leading into kind of what got you more into your focus, one of your current focus points now, which is forests. So can you tell us a little bit about like why forests, maybe like what forests mean to you personally, and then also in terms of like, I guess like biologically or environmentally, like why forests? Why are forests important?
You're right. Well, it's really, I don't even know where to begin. But I think a place to begin would be to imagine a future without forests. And it would be one that's obviously sad, because I think anybody who likes nature loves forests. Even if you don't love nature, I think most people like forests. So I think it would be very sad to imagine a future without forests. But another thing is that it would be a much, much hotter and a much, much lonelier future. The deforestation is now sadly, rampaging the forests around the world, namely the tropical forests of Amazon and Southeast Asia and also Africa. And the effect of that is, climate change will get worse and biodiversity will go down. The reason that it's bad for climate change is because when you deforest forests, you are allowing carbon to go back into the atmosphere. Also, when people deforest forests, I should just say when deforestation happens, a lot of times it's done through slash and burn. When you slash and then you burn the forest, all the carbon that was captured in the biomass of the forest is released back into the atmosphere. And also, forests are a carbon sink, which means that they suck carbon out of the atmosphere and keep it in the biomass, which means if you have less forests, the earth has less sinks. So you go into a negative spiral where you're emitting more carbon, you're releasing more carbon into the atmosphere, while you're also shrinking Earth's capacity to suck more carbon and store it. And so forests are really important. And the IPCC, which is said to be the golden standard for climate science, clearly states that we need to eliminate deforestation and regenerate new forests in order to reach the internationally agreed climate goals enshrined in the Paris Agreement. And the lesser mentioned thing about forests is biodiversity. And scientists say that we're going through Earth's 6th mass extinction. And the last one, by the way, the 5th one, was when the meteor struck Earth and the dinosaurs went extinct. And well, you might think of it as a tragic accident, but that's the only reason why we're here today. But anyway, what's happening is the 6th mass extinction, which is happening right now, is comparable to the scale of extinction that was happening due to this meteor that struck Earth and wiped out dinosaurs from this planet. And who's causing the 6th mass extinction? It's us. And what's the leading cause of this extinction is deforestation. So deforestation is one of the leading cause of extinction on this planet right now. And we're losing, scientists say, up to 200 species every day. And this is being caused by the loss of 8 of Amsterdam in forests also every day. So it's an imperative for us to stop this if we want a future that is livable for us, other life on this planet, from every angle imaginable. And also, I think one of the questions that you may have after hearing this is, well, how am I connected to that? Or how am I connected to the forests? And it might seem like a very distant thing, because when you talk about the Amazon, for example, for where I am in Japan, it's almost 24 hours to get there, 12-hour flight, somewhere to South America or Central or North America, and then another flight down to South America, and then hours on a bus. So it takes a lot of time to get there. So it's very, very far. But every time we take a breath, we're breathing in the forest, essentially. So we're all connected. And I think we're going to talk about this later in today's discussion. But through the food that we eat, we're obviously connected to deforestation in the forests as well. So we're connected to it in just so many ways.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, that's great. We can kind of hop around a bit and we can go ahead and talk about what are some of the primary causes of the deforestation that you mentioned, and then if you could kind of specifically speak to like food and agriculture related deforestation too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the cause of deforestation depends on which forest you're talking about. When we think tropical rainforest, we often think immediately Amazon. And it's true, Brazil has the biggest amount of rainforests of all countries. Russia has more forests, but not rainforests. So Brazil has the most amount of rainforests in the world. And I think the association there is, as I said, usually rainforest equals Brazil or Amazon. But we also have rainforests in Indonesia, in Africa, in Vietnam, all over the world. Essentially around the equator, we have rainforests. So deforestation, again, depends on which country you're talking about. For example, in Indonesia, it's mainly to produce palm oil. In Africa, it's mainly for all sorts of different types of agriculture. In the Amazon, it's mostly for soy. And palm oil is, of course, connected to our food as well. And of course, so is soy. But I'll take the example of soy for now. It is said that about 90%, or some say that about 90% of the deforestation in Amazon is due to soy production. So farmers want to create new soy fields. And the reason that this is being created is to feed cattle, to feed livestock, chicken, beef, pork. In order for us to consume that, these three animals must eat something. And today, their main source of protein or feed is soy. It's a combination usually of soy and corn and a bunch of other things, which, by the way, these animals are not evolved to eat in the first place, so it's not healthy for them. And if it's not healthy for them, it's not healthy for us to eat those that are eating unhealthily, by the way. But that would be the connection that we have to deforestation. So through the meat that we consume, which is in turn consuming soy, which is in turn grown on deforested land, we are, through our food choices, more than likely to be involved in deforestation. The same goes for a lot of the chips that we eat every day, or the shampoo that we use, or the soap that we use. Palm oil is one of the most important oils or fats in creating things like shampoo and daily appliances, like even your dishwashing soap. So oftentimes if you track, and you can track this because a lot of nonprofits have done the research, but if you track where the oil that's being used for these everyday products is coming from, you find that it's coming from palm oil, which is often not done sustainably in countries like Indonesia.
Okay, cool. Are there sustainable ways to produce palm oil?
There's a roundtable talk of sustainable to make sustainable palm oil more of a mainstream thing, and I don't really have a definitive opinion on this because it's very much debated and still up for question. But personally, I think it would be very difficult to approach this issue by saying we can make all the current palm oil fields sustainable, because there's still the very strong pull of demand coming from the consumers, which is each and every one of us. What I mean by that is by us purchasing the things that we want to purchase, for example, chips or crisps if you're British, which uses palm oil, we are, through a very, 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 very complicated supply chain, a web of supply chains, we are involved in the deforestation in Indonesia for palm oil. So can you make all those palm oil plantations sustainable through a roundtable talk? Perhaps, but can you stop deforestation when it's merely responding to the demand side? that's coming from the consumers, I would say no. So I think one of the really important things to keep within the discussion is how do we approach the demand side? How do we also change the way that people are consuming things? Because as long as the demand is there and the economy exists for it, the suppliers will want to supply it because they know they can make money off of it. And I think that's one of the underlying issues around deforestation, which are often not questioned. I think you hear in a lot of places people saying, well, you shouldn't be cutting that forest down, or well, you shouldn't be planting those palm trees for the oil. But if you're eating chips on the side of that,
people aren't going to say you shouldn't be eating.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Exactly. Actually,
Yeah.
it's really difficult to be like, hey, man, stop eating those chips.
Yeah. Somehow being able to more clearly see the connectedness of supply chains and value chains, and I mean, for myself personally as well. I mean, we're all kind of in this. Are there any decent examples you've seen of curbing the demand side? Like, I mean, this is arguably probably one of the most difficult parts of climate change is consumer and individual behavior, right? Have you seen any kind of advancements in terms of what might work to
I think that's a really, really complicated question. But I think one of the areas where that's possibly happening is, and I don't have the data to back this up, so it's mostly based on intuition. But for example, if you go to the supermarket in Tokyo today, you can find a lot of fair trade coffee. And fair trade has been criticized for a lot of different reasons. So it's not a bulletproof system from what I know. But this is engaging consumers who want to be more responsible in their choices. And as awareness is growing over all sorts of different issues, from climate change to biodiversity loss to bad agricultural practices, I think on the consumer side, people are looking for better choices. And fair trade, as well as, for example, there's other certifications for all sorts of different products. There's the Marine Stewardship Code for fish. There's some for paper. There's others for coffee. And I think those are maybe the examples that we can look at today that show that there is a large demand of people who want to consume positively. How much has that worked? Are we seeing real changes on the ground in response to these? If you look at the data around, for example, deforestation or the collapsing fish stocks in the oceans, then you would have to say that at mass scales at the moment, it's still not working. But these are the positive signs that we should look to.
So the certifications as a starting point, because and continuing with the certification. But that, I mean, this is a ongoing conversation of how the best start to curb the demand or shift consumer demand, which is a slow battle, I think. But
it's so difficult. And I mean, there's also the criticism that these what is it called? These certifications are only benefiting the larger corporations. Because, for example, if you were a fishing company, which are the companies that can actually afford a certification?
Right.
Obviously, the large ones who can go through the processes. If you were, in fact, I would argue that probably most of the sustainable fishing practices or the fishermen around the world could never afford a certification program. A local fisherman in Ethiopia, for example, would never be able to afford any sort of certification. So it's not everything. I think the most important thing is to always be able to research and look and be curious of what's going on the other side. So the certification programs, again, I think they're striving for great things, but are not bulletproof. And what I personally do, I guess I should have just shared this from the beginning, but at a personal level, I try to consume as much as possible from people that, from farms that, well, directly from farms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say, because there's, I mean, you mentioned like fishing specifically, or products that might come from forests, and we see a lot of the same patterns in the food world, of course, which and like organic certification. Like speaking from the US, and even from some people I've spoken to in Japan as well, trying to get that certification can be extremely cumbersome and difficult, even if the product is already like natural and would pass probably the tests. It's a costly thing, and it's a resource time management thing as well. And so going back to exactly your last point, like getting to know the producer, like taking out as many steps in that chain as you can, to where you're hopefully buying directly, does help with a lot of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And growing what you can at home when possible, but yeah. But that's another.
I haven't gotten to the home farming yet, but the home forestry.
Yeah, it looks like you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Can maybe since you've given us a really good background, you know, kind of about why forests and a lot of the issues there, can you tell us now a little bit about WeMori specifically, and like why that platform, and just kind of a background and the why behind that? Yeah,
for sure. Very happy to share. By the way, I'm just noticing that this is probably the first time I'm in an event representing WeMori.
Okay, yeah. Cool.
We're still a very young organization, and it's only been like 6 months since our founding. And the platform, which Chris has been speaking of, is under development at the moment. So we don't really have something to show you yet, but I'm very happy to share. So what we're trying to do at WeMori is to bring together the global community to protect and restore forests around the world. I think I've explained the reasons why we're doing this, but just to kind of double down on those things. So we have climate change and biodiversity loss, and these are two mega crises that we face today. Particularly my generation and younger, or the younger you get, you will be on the receiving end of a crisis that you've never created. You didn't really partake in the creation of. So what I want to do is what I'm doing is creating a platform targeting the younger generation, for them to engage in the movement to protect and restore forests around the world. So what we're creating right now is a simple smartphone app where we catalog the most high impact community-driven projects to protect and restore forests from around the world, and users can, with a few taps of their fingers, donate to these projects. That's basically the core function of the app.
Very cool. Okay, so I myself, as a user, I can go on and choose to donate a certain amount, and that will then be equivalent to trees that will be planted somewhere, right?
Yes. So yes, absolutely. Cool. We have protect and restore. Protection is conservation. So today you hear a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of campaigns around planting trees, and a lot of them are questionable, in my opinion, because they have nothing to do with forests. They're just planting monocultures, which is not a good thing. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that tree planting has become, almost like a fashion or a fad. But on the other side, there's protecting, which is there are forests which are being cut down today, and it's really important that we prevent those from being cut down. Standing forests shall remain standing, I think, is another missing half of the debate. And also, a lot of the forests which are being cut down today are primary forests. Primary forests have all sorts of different names, traditional forests. There's just so many different names to call primary forests, but basically what they are they're forests that have never gone through human intervention or interference. So some of these forests are millions of years old, and they're being cut down, and they have so much life in them that we don't even know of. So I think it's also really important to protect forests that we have today. And through WeMori, the way that we're approaching the protection side has quite a wide range, but one of our focuses is to put these lands under a trust. So what that means is that we put it under local ownership in the respective countries where we're collaborating with local community organizations. But essentially what we do is we fund the purchasing of the most carbon and biodiversity rich areas of the forest so as to keep them from any interference. Or, for example, if there's an indigenous population living in there, by putting that under the trust of the indigenous people, that land will not have to be mined. It won't have to be turned into a dam. It won't have to be turned into a soybean farm because it's protected under a trust by the hands of the indigenous people. And for example, if I was a user, what I would do is donate a few hundred, I guess yen is not really a currency that a lot of the viewers know, a few dollars to put that land under protection. And reforestation or regeneration, or there's many ways to call it, which is the other half, would be tree planting. But I do want to be very clear about the difference of tree planting and regenerating a forest, because a lot of the time tree planting could be simply just the same thing as intensive farming. You know, like cabbage.
Yeah.
That's
only cabbage.
Only cabbage, straight line cabbage, rows and rows of cabbage. That's not really a forest. So diverse species, not monocultures, and the role of human to be to support the forest so it's able to regenerate on its own, which means that the trees could drop seeds which then grow new trees, and the role of the human is just to facilitate that. So that's regenerating forests, which is, we do call it tree planting as well sometimes, just for the simplicity of the language, but it is the difference, and one of the things that we really want to we value is that our focus is forests, not trees.
Right. That's really important and really well said, because as you said, they're likely to be kind of more and more of these like apps or platforms or ways to donate that you could see, but it really matters getting into the specifics, right? And getting into the weeds a little bit, and to find out where what the end result is actually going to be. Because also
weeds are so complicated. The weeds of forests are just, I mean, so complex, because as we spoke already, there's the whole, the soybean, there's the meat, there's the palm oil, there's the consumers who are driving the deforestation. There's the suppliers who are not paying attention to sustainable practices. There's indigenous people who need jobs. There's people like me who want to protect the forests. There's other people who are building narratives around the world who want to restore the forests or plant monocrops. It's extremely, extremely complicated. But I think, and I would never be as arrogant as to say that I understand all of it, because I don't. But as our approach, a few of the things that we always want to really hold closely is community driven and never monoculture. So the focus is always forest, not trees. And sorry that I cut you off, but I just
no.
Make that super clear.
No, that's really good. That's important to know, because just one small thing I was going to say is when similar to like agriculture and food production, when there's a monoculture forest, it ruins the soil. Actually.
Absolutely.
Right. So forests are incredibly complex and can grow a lot of food as well, obviously, and we might take a little dive into that a little bit later. But you spoke to kind of the difference between trees and forests, and when we were talking last week, you mentioned kind of the logo behind WeMori, and actually the kanji, like the symbol in Japanese or kanji of what forest is, and so what the difference is between mori, which is forest, and hayashi. So could you speak a little bit to that, and why that logo for WeMori?
Absolutely. So it involves a little bit about a story about our name. But our name is WeMori, and we sometimes get criticism that that it reminds people of WeWork, but that was never at the front of my mind when I thought of the name. The meaning of the name is actually our forest, and mori is the Japanese word for forest. And in English, there's actually no distinction. Well, there's no other word for forest, is there? You put an adjective before forest to describe the different types of forests. For example, timber forest, or primary forest, secondary forest, tertiary forest. But in Japanese, that's done in another way. So you say forest or you say mori for forest, and you say hayashi for any forest that has human involvement. And then the word for tree is ki. And I hope you're following, but the kanji, which is the Chinese character or the Japanese character for forest, is represented by 3 trees. And hayashi is represented by 2 trees. And tree is basically just one of those characters. So if you just quickly Google forest, a Japanese character, you'll see a character that has the identical character just kind of lined up next to each other like this, one on top of 2. And our logo comes from there. I don't know if you've been able to see our logo. You'll be able to see it on our website. Maybe I can share with you later, but is 3 trees as well, or 3 simple characters of a tree, which represents WeMori, forest. And the distinction between a forest and a hayashi ties into what we were speaking earlier about the difference between paying attention to forest and trees. But a hayashi is a type of forest that requires human management. So, for example, a timber forest, which is often a monoculture, would be classified as a hayashi in Japanese because it requires human involvement for it to continue regenerating. For example, if you had a timber forest, common practice would be to thin the forest down by cutting some trees so that others can receive light to grow tall enough to produce enough wood for timber later on in its life cycle. Whereas a forest, or mori in Japanese, is the equivalent of a primary or secondary forest, which exists purely for the purpose of being a forest and doesn't require human involvement for it to regenerate. What that means is the seedlings that are dropped from the trees create new trees, and the forest just continues itself. So it's a self-sustaining ecosystem, whereas hayashi, which would be tertiary forests or timber forests or all sorts of other forests which are not primary or secondary, would be classified as, again, hayashi. And so our focus is mori, which is forest, which is very closely linked to the story behind our name and our logo.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed when you told me that and kind of the symbolism behind it all and kind of what it all means. So
thanks. Yeah.
Cool. Are you able to share with us yet any of the other kind of organizations or companies or groups that you've been talking to or working on with?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's confidential at this point or if you're able to share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wonder if there's anything that's confidential. I would say we have no secrets. So our launch partner organization called World Land Trust. They're based in the UK. They're a UK-based charity, and they have 25 years of experience protecting and restoring forests around the world. And they work with local organizations to protect and restore forests. So WeMori will be collaborating with them to bring these projects in a much more digestible manner to the younger generation. Again, since we're an app, what the user is capable of doing is donating to these projects really, really easily. So one of the difficulties I've had, my journey with forests came out of a desire to protect and restore forests for the sake of biodiversity and climate, and by extension, all of us. But as I was doing my research on, okay, so if I want to really spend my life energy on forests, I really want to know which organizations are active, what they're doing, and maybe either join them and if they're not compelling enough, I'll just start something on my own. But as I did my research, one of the things that I realized was that there's so many barriers to action. And what I mean by that is that, for example, if you were somebody who one day thought, or if you saw on the TV that the Amazon was burning and you said, I want to do something, and you went online and you were looking for organizations, you'll find so many which are doing something slightly different, it seems, but you're not really sure, and you're also not really sure how your money is going to be used. And you know, there's a concept in psychology called the paradox of choice. And they did this this clinical test where they invited people to two scenarios. One, there was like tens of hundreds of jams. The other one, there was just a few, and each were stores. And more people bought jams from the store with fewer choices. And that's the paradox of choice. When there's so many decisions to make, you end up not making a decision. And I think this is, first and foremost, the paradox of choice is what is preventing people from taking action in the environmental field. So I wanted to make it really simple by having a platform where you can see all the different projects. Well, that was first and foremost the first barrier of action that I wanted to get rid of, which this app would allow. And the second barrier to action was that donating is just kind of annoying. You know, you finally find the organizations you like, and then you want to donate to them, and then it takes you to this page where you have to write down all your information, and then choose the amount, and then you put in your credit card information, and then you donate. And for $5, that's kind of quite a bit of work. So this kind of tediousness involved in donating could be eliminated if the format is an app, because most people's credit card informations are already registered in their phone, that it's literally a tap away. It's just, it makes it so much easier and more intuitive, and you know, just simplifies the process. And I'm going on, I'm sorry. But and the third barrier of action is that if you donate, you only hear from the organization once. They send you a thank you email, and they might put you on an email list, and you receive updates from the organization, but you don't really ever get to understand the impact that your money has had. And this third point, which ties into why we value transparency, is really, really important, because I think, thinking of myself, I would only want to donate if I knew what impact my money was having. So one of the things we want to do on our platform, and we will do on our platform, is you will be able to know exactly how much carbon you stored, exactly how many trees you've protected or restored, where that was, potentially even who planted it, which species you've managed to protect through that. And we also want to make it possible for you to receive right in your hands project updates, which are coming from the ground. So there's a new relationship that we're trying to build between the donor and the project, which hitherto has not really been done yet.
Very cool. And you mentioned to me earlier, I think it was like a large percentage, if not 100% of the donation is going directly to the the end cause, right?
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit, so this is not a profit-driven enterprise at all. In fact, our last 6 months has been absolutely not a profit-driven 6 months. Especially with the corona, it's been a really, really difficult situation for any nonprofit to exist, I think. But our goal is to get enough support for our organization from corporations, as well as philanthropists, as well as grants, so that any donations that's made through our platform, 100% of it would go to the project.
Awesome. Seems like a very smart way to run it, and in a more impactful way, you know, kind of giving a little bit more to the donor.
For a long time I really struggled with this, because there's not really like accelerator programs for new nonprofits. There's a lot of things out there if you want to do a for-profit oriented enterprise. As a startup, there's a lot of support systems and a lot of accelerators. And because the predominant language of creating something new today is around profit and startups, I was very much leaning towards the mindset of, how can we make our app a money-making machine?
Yeah.
But I realized that was the wrong approach, because we're a for-profit, we're a for-impact organization. We're not a for-profit organization. A lot of people like to call organizations like us not-for-profit or non-profit, but I think the correct way to call it is for-impact. Basically, all our money and energy is used towards maximizing environmental impact. And if you think of it that way, then it doesn't make any sense to be taking 20% of a cut of the donation you make through the app in order to sustain our activities. Our job is to make it possible for people who want to take action to know that their money is having an impact. And if we're taking money out of there to feed ourselves, I thought, well, that's a very for-profit way of thinking. And what we need to do is think of it in a for-impact way of thinking. And actually, one of our volunteers, Joanna, who might be watching, suggested to me that there's an organization out there that's making it possible for people to donate 100% of their, they're making it sure that 100% of donors' donations go towards the project exists. And I thought, well, you know what, that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be calculating the best algorithm so that we're taking a little bit of a cut and then making ourselves sustainable. Like, we should be really making it clear that people are able to donate all their money to these projects, because those projects are where the money is needed. And if we can figure out a way through grants, corporate, for example, consulting or whatever, to feed ourselves, then the platform should exist as a hub to have an impact.
Right. And then I was going to ask this earlier, but just quickly, in terms of the impact, you mentioned like sometimes in the local communities where the trees will be planted, where the forests will be regenerated, I should say. That might actually lead towards creating some like local job opportunities, right? If it's scaled up and done in the right way, then it can hopefully have that impact as well. Because one of the complicated things you mentioned is that oftentimes practices which are, contributing to climate change, one of the realities is oftentimes they're providing jobs in areas that need jobs, right? So if you could just tell us a little bit about kind of your vision or hopes for like the local community building and employment opportunities potentially that could come out of it.
Yes, absolutely. So that's kind of an area where I'm really eager to learn more about myself. So if there's anything that I'm going to say that should be corrected, I welcome that. And I say that because it's, again, an extremely complex issue. For example, we want to work with World Land Trust on a project in Kenya. And there's a forest which is called the Dakacha woodland. And there's this particular and very beautiful, extremely colorful bird that exists there. And it only exists in two forests. One is the Dakacha and one is a neighboring forest. But the only place that this bird nests is in the Dakacha woodlands. And this, in the Dakacha woodlands, is slowly contracting in size because of local pineapple farming and also logging for charcoal. As well as firewood. But there's an organization that's on the ground that's trying to put the Dakacha woodlands, a lot of it, under a trust so as to protect it, because it's one of the most biodiverse forests that are left on our planet. However, by putting that under a trust, you're essentially disallowing people to farm in those areas. And a lot of the farming and a lot of the logging is actually illegal in the first place. So there is there's a legal line there that is being crossed by these farmers. However, I'm sure if you speak to them personally, they have their own reasons of doing that. And that's why it's an extremely complicated situation, which requires a really well, first of all, I think an understanding of the complexity of the situation, which I would not say that I have. But in such a situation, what's the right decision to make is, I think, very, very difficult. but I think it's imperative that you are aware of those local needs as well, and what are the push and pull factors which are driving people to log for wood illegally, for charcoal, or to expand their pineapple farms illegally. And honestly, I don't have an answer to that. And if you look at the macro scale, if you're looking at this from like super macro climate change and biodiversity loss perspective, then you can say, oh, no way, we have to protect that forest, and that's correct. But on the other hand, if you're a farmer who's hungry and needs to feed your kids, and you say, but I need to expand my farm to get an income, that's also correct.
Right.
So I think the approach there is not to believe that you're correct in taking one approach over another, but to always be willing to take in the complexity and work with it. And I personally haven't, and most likely will not be able to go to on the grounds of the projects that we'll be supporting. It won't be that I am able to absorb and understand the complexity in every single instance. And that's why we work with organizations that have a brilliant and long track record, who we believe we can trust. But I think all I can say really, all I can say for certain is that it's extremely complicated. And what should we do to deal with those pull and push factors that are creating these tensions? Really depends on every single case. It would be different. But but one of the things that I am pledging myself to is that for the reforestation programs or the trust programs that we do support, is that there's always local level agreement, that it's a local initiative, and that there's local communities that are being involved, so that the due diligence is made. So it's not like WeMori is suddenly coming into Kenya and being like, hey, I love
do things.
You see this colorful bird I saw in my dreams?
Yeah.
Like, I love it. Let's keep it. That's not the approach. So the due diligence has to be made every single time. I don't have a sweeping answer to how do we resolve the complexity.
Localization and taking all local factors into account. Is a good start, at least a good.
I mean, it's just so complicated, and I've we're in like weekly conversations in World Land Trust to have these exact discussions, and one of the questions we always ask is how are the locals being involved? How are the local communities being involved? And for the reforestation or afforestation programs they have, it's always creating local employment. That's one of the necessary one of the criteria for them to even have a project in the first place is that it's employing local people. And once WeMori is an organization that could allow me to travel over to see these organizations, that's one of the first things I would make sure is actually happening. But then again, I mean, again, like it's extremely complex. But for now, what I can pledge and promise is that I never want WeMori to become an organization where we do not have or we reject the capacity to acknowledge this complexity. Because I think it's often the case with these tree planting programs. It's simply, we're planting trees everywhere, and that's it. We always want to have confronting this complexity and always facing it.
Accepting the complexity rather than sweeping solutions is key.
It's absolutely
also for future food. I think for trying to do it the right way. Okay, cool. Thank you. I wanted to let's maybe talk a bit about or at least share a few videos about agroforestry. Just because I think it's pretty interesting to tie in kind of what future food focuses on a lot, which is food and production of food and enjoying food, everything food related, and forests. And I've watched a few videos recently that were quite cool. And actually for our Food for Earth Day event, we did like a global marathon.
Okay.
And the Brazil session touched on a really cool couple that's in Brazil doing a really big, impactful agroforestry project. And I think they've been at it for a while. And I personally want to look into it a little more. But I think Francesco, if you could share that one, a link to that video, that's pretty cool. So that we can learn more about that. And then there's also a video of Jeff Lawton, who's like a permaculture. He's a British guy, but he's been living in Australia for a while, and he's kind of a permaculture agroforestry expert. And I think I sent that video to you as well. But yeah, the connections are cool. And if did you say the website is ready yet, or the WeMori website?
Yeah, we have a website.
Okay.
Yeah, we
And
just
what
don't
is
have the app yet.
Okay.
It's www.wemori.org.
Okay, I'm just gonna type in, and if I'm not sure if we could share that either. And if, sorry, we didn't mention this earlier, if anyone watching has any questions, obviously feel free to ask. And if you want to post them later on the video link, we can get back to you and answer for sure.
Yes, please ask any questions. I'm really happy to answer.
Yeah, sorry, we've been keeping it a little bit internal, but
I've been speaking way too much.
No. That's the idea. That was the goal. So, okay. So before we kind of start to wrap up, was there anything else you wanted to touch on, or anything else you wanted to mention? Or?
One of the things that WeMori really, I personally want to keep as like a core aspect of WeMori is collaboration. And I don't even know where to begin, but I don't believe in a world where everybody believes that they have the answers. I believe in a world where everybody accepts that they don't. And that's like one of the approaches that WeMori wants to take. And I think that's what I was trying to say when in dealing with the projects that we take on, that we want to be able to confront complexity and always be able to have the humility to accept that we don't have the answers necessarily. And so that's our approach. The approach is we're trying our best, but we don't know everything. We're not perfect. So if any of you watching this have any input, if you know anybody who might want to collaborate with us, if you want to point out any of our blind spots, please do. If you want to volunteer with us, we have an amazing group of volunteers who are writing articles, reaching out to people who we can have events with.
Do you take international volunteers?
Absolutely, okay. Yeah. I mean,
cool.
Most of the app is going to be in English, and the common language among the volunteers is English as well. So I would love to have you on our team. We have a real great time. In fact, there's an all-team call that's coming up on next Friday, actually a week from today. So that would be the perfect place for you to join. We also have a crowdfunding campaign that's coming up, which we're going to start it probably on the 30th of June. And it's looking like a really awesome campaign.
Yeah, I forgot to ask about this. Yeah, it is very cool.
Yeah. I guess maybe one thing I also want to say is that I've been talking a lot about the app, and this often happens because our solutions that we're offering are very product oriented in that we're providing an app. But the change that has to happen is not that we put an app out there and people use it. The change that has to happen is we have to pivot from this current degenerative society to a regenerative society. And WeMori is simply a piece within that puzzle that's approaching it from the angle of forests. And this change has to happen not out of desire because I love forests or because I love the ocean, but out of necessity because we can't continue the climate crisis to go on like this, or biodiversity to keep depleting. And what I mean about this pivot is that today our system, as I said, I think in the very beginning of this talk, is structured in a way that more economic activity is, the more social activity is, we're seeing degeneration in the environment. We've seen through this corona, with the economic pause induced by the lockdown, daily carbon emissions go down by 17%. And we've seen wildlife return to areas where they've been away from for a really long time. These data are proof that our current system is against the interest of, in fact, ourselves, but more directly the health of the environment. So we have to pivot towards a society where we are not only reducing our impact, but in fact making up for the impact we've had in the past, which is why I advocate for a regenerative society. What a regenerative society would look like, for example, would be for every green smoothie that you drink, an acre of forest is being protected somewhere, for example. Because that would allow the positive impact coming out of that behavior of consuming that green smoothie to be larger than the externality that comes out of it. That is to say that we need to be structuring our activities and both socially and economically so that we are, again, making up for what we've already destroyed and replenishing and regenerating. And without making this pivot, I don't know what we're gonna do. Honestly, I don't know how our grandchildren are gonna have a fun out in the streets. I don't know. So yeah,
that's a really good point. And using what intelligence or what skills as humans we do have to not only do less and buy less and consume less, but actually to creatively, I sometimes think of like shifting from, kind of thoughtless consumer to creative producer. Be a creative producer, whether it's planting, or contributing to good causes financially or physically, or whatever it might be. So yeah, rather than just finding out the balance of what to start to take away from life and then what to actually give more of in life. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Absolutely. And I also just want to point out that this requires us to rethink our relationship to money, but more expansively nature. Because if you think about why we as individuals are able to exist today in the form that we are, you would be astounded to find out that that has everything to do with the cycles of how Earth rotates around the sun. And so our very existence is reliant on the existence of nature in the exact way that it is today. And to be simply taking and reducing the capacity of our more immediate natural environment is in direct contradiction with us being able to live here today. And yet we still look at the environment as a subject of consumption, is that we keep taking, we take the fish, we take the trees, we take the minerals, we take the air, we breathe it in, and yet we have, most of us never consider giving back. And while the dominant narrative today is how can we be better consumers, I think we should prepare ourselves and willingly jump into thinking about how can we start just simply giving back. And this requires quite the consciousness shift, which I want to stand and advocate for. And WeMori stands for that. It's giving you an opportunity to just give back, which I think is a missing part of the narrative because people are so scared to talk against the mechanisms of the market. Because the market is completely reliant on us consuming things. But perhaps, and I think it is, and I believe it is, time for us to just give back. And so, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And that's the global shift that we need to create and that I want to create, which like WeMori is a tiny part of, but a very important part of. And yeah, again, we're having a crowdfunding campaign, so please check it out.
Awesome. And it's a very cool and creative one. And,
Thank you. Yeah. I wish I had time to talk about it today, but you'll see it. You'll see it all.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to help, blast that out when we can.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We need the help.
No, let's see. Okay, I don't think there were any questions. So we did such a great job. We just answered everything. No, but thank you so much for taking the time and for speaking to us and for telling us more about the project, about forests, about so many things. So
I am so thankful. Yeah, I feel like I still have a lot of work to do in order to communicate myself more eloquently with these things, but I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope I see you again somewhere. And thank you, Chris. We're having a very conscious meal probably after this. So
yeah,
I look forward to that.
Right, me too. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
And also after this, there's going to be a really cool session live from Italy. So be sure
Check it out
to tune in for that. That will be, I think, starting in about 5 or 6 hours. So it'll be a little late in Japan. But definitely, please, if you're on European time or the Americas time or Africa, depending on the hemisphere, you might be able to see it live, and if not, it'll be recorded. So please check that out too. So thanks again, and we'll see you at the next event.
Bye bye. The future is regenerative.
That's right.